Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming and joining us this evening for the learning of Teres Hashem. Be'ezras Hashem Yisbach. As always, we begin B'Rishus Tamar Asra, or Rav Landau, with continued appreciation to all of you for coming and making the shir possible. We learn tonight two sponsors in order of receiving them by my good Talmud, the Binkowitz family. L'Refuah Shalema for Chayesara Bas Leah. She should have Refuah Shalema B'Seich Shacheli Yisrael. She's in big need of Rachmei Shemayim. Hashem should grant it to her that she should have Refuah HaNefesh, be encouraged, and Refuah HaGuf to get back to taking care of her family. The shir is also sponsored by my good friends Dr. and Mrs. Tzvi Nass, who is a wonderful pediatrician in Forest Hills, in the Forest Hills area, at 7601 113th Street, 718-520-1070. And Dr. and Mrs. Tzvi Nass are sponsoring the shir in honor of the marriage of their daughter Rachel to Aaron Moshe Waldstein. The Zivik should be Eli Yafazain, and they should be Baina by Yisnem Yisrael. We know at the tefillah that all those that have been touched by the dreaded Machla, known as Yana Machla, other related diseases, should have Refuah Shalema B'Seich Shacheli Yisrael. All of us and our loved ones should always be healthy. Those that are waiting shidduchim should find their shidduch quickly and easily. Those that are waiting children should be blessed with Zar Chai V'Kayama, healthy mommy, healthy baby. We should have Parnasa B'Revach V'Chavod and Lange Gesund Tziz Shalom Bayis. This week's parsha is one of the most practical applications to the contemporary challenges in the Jewish world. One of the 365 lavin is the serious lav of Lo Yiyeh Korach v'chadasai, not to be like Korach and his assemblage. Talmidim of mine have heard for the last 3+ decades that machloikis is an anagram of chelek maves, a portion of death. And we all know from the Parsha that, and as Rashi elaborates, that in Shemayim they only punish at 20, Bezdin only punishes at 13, but for the sin of machloikis even infants die. And that means that even if the parents have to live because of other reasons, because they are needed by the rest of their children, or they're taking care of parents, or other reasons, sometimes Hashem will take away an infant because they are involved in machlokes. It's a terrible, the price to pay for machlokes is a very heavy one. And we've said over many times from Rav Miller, that Rav Miller was asked, was there only one time where there was machlokes? Only if the sin is that the ground opens up and swallows people, why aren't there sinkholes all over the world? There should be sinkholes. We should be walking on 13th Avenue and the ground will open up under people. You're in a concert and there should be all of a sudden ground opening up, swallowing up people alive. Why is it that only one time in the history of mankind was such an event happened where the ground opened up and swallowed people? Why isn't it a much more common occurrence? And Rav Miller said it is. If you go to a cemetery and you walk down, let's say it's Tisha B'Av, and you walk in the cemetery and you look at the gravestones, you'll see this one died at 39, and this one died at 47, and this one died at 53. Rahman al-Litzlan, many of the times the ground opened up early to swallow them because they were involved in machlokes. A very scary thing that Rav Miller says. The Chofetz Chaim in Shmiras Haloshin, Perek Aleph Tezvav, the Korach Gems says that the sin of machlokes is so dangerous because it is a gateway to so many other terrible transgressions, such as Chil Hashem, Lashon Hara, Rechilas, Nikama, vengeance, Netira, grudges, Oinas Devarim, hurting people's feelings, and I'll add, although he doesn't mention it, Sheker, lying. So it leads to a lot of other terrible things. Reb Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, Zecher Tzadik Levrachas Chus Yagen Aleinu, on Mishlei, warns us that there are people that like a good fight. There are people like that. They like to give and take. They like to be right. They like to have the last word. They like to wield power. They like to show that they know what they're saying. He says, watch out for such people. They like fights. The Chavetz Chaim says, again in Perek Aleph, Tezvav, he says, if you realize that you're involved in a machlokes, you wake up sometimes, you get involved, and then you realize, this is machlokes. He says, if you realize that you're involved in machlokes, stop and get out of it, even if it causes you humiliation. People say, what do you mean? You were involved. What are you doing now? You're a wimp? You can't stand up for what's right? He says, get out of it, even if it causes you humiliation. And he quotes a Mishnah in Idyas, Parakeh Mishnah Vav, where it says, better to be considered a fool for your entire life in this world than to get Hashem angry for one moment. That's what the Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, that's what the Chavetz Chaim quotes from Mishnah in Idyas. Chavetz Chaim says something else. Chavetz Chaim says that machlokes is so heinous, is so terrible, such a terrible thing, that even if you want to get involved in machlokes because of your parents are embroiled in machlokes, and you say, listen, for the sake of my parents, I got to stand up for my parents. He said, don't even get involved in machlokes because your parents are involved. Don't even do that. He says, because the Bnei Korach stopped from getting involved in the machlokes, that's why a ledge came out, and they were saved at the nick of time from plummeting down to Gehenna. Saved at the nick of Bnei Korach Leimesu. So you see, what do you learn from that? That you shouldn't even get involved in machlokes, even if you're doing it with righteous indignation for the sake of your parents. Don't get involved. When I was growing up, there was no such thing as a nut-free environment. We didn't have anything like that. We didn't have, they used to serve on a plane, nuts. No such thing. I had two dreadful cases that I know of. I was very, very friendly with Rabbi Salnika from Jackson Heights, later on from Kew Garden Hills, a very close friend of mine. His first wife, Betty, was an Isha Tzidkaniyos. She was very allergic to sesame seeds. And in a tzedakah dinner, they served a salad, and embedded in the salad, wasn't visible, was sesame seeds. She ate it, she went into shock, she lingered in a coma for 9 months, and she passed away. Also serious, but Mirz Hashem will have a happy ending. My wife, my Rebbetzin Shashi, her latest mechutenista, Mrs. Morell from London, also had the same thing. She had a salad, she didn't know it had sesame seeds. She had a reaction, she went to the hospital, they overdosed her. She had a stroke and a heart attack. A young woman of 41 years old. It's Hashem, she's recovering very slowly. Shendel Shlema, Chai Rachel Etel Bashalamis, should have a refuah shalema. The reason why I mention this is that nuts could be very dangerous. I brought up my family that we're allergic that way to machlokes. That's the way I brought up my children. Our family has an allergy. It's an allergy that is deadly. It's called machlokes. That's the way you have to, already from young children on, young children, they fight in the schoolyard, you tell them no fighting. Fighting is extremely dangerous. I want to start off the shir with something that is brought down in Avos Reb Nosson. In Avos Reb Nosson it says, on elaborating on what we all know in the Mishnah, Al tarba sicha im ha'isha. Don't speak a lot with a woman. Be'ishta yamra, it says with one's wife, and of course with an isha acheres. Now an isha acheres we understand. It's only trouble to talk. Sometimes a person is enamored by a woman, by her beauty, by her charisma, by her sweetness, and enjoys talking. For a man, that's dangerous. That we understand. Well, what does it mean, be'ishtayam? Don't talk about to your wife. What do you mean? It's a big mitzvah to talk to your wife. She's home stuck, let's say, with the kids the whole day. She needs adult chatter. She wants the connection. She wants to feel close to her husband. It's a very big mitzvah. You have to get to know your wife. Yitzchak, Pachad Yitzchak, it says that they was Mesachek with his wife. He was causing her to laugh. What do you mean, Al Tarba Sicha Meisha? What does that mean? So in Avos Reb Nosson it says that if somebody insults you in shul or at work, don't go home and tell your wife. Don't do that. Now, even though it sounds like in Avos Reb Nosson that the reason is because she'll use it against you. When she gets upset with you, she'll say, yeah, I'm not the only one that thinks this. The guys at work think that too. Don't give your wife ammunition. That's the way Reb Miller learns the Mishnah. But the Chavetz Chaim says the pshat is because if you go and you tell your wife, it's probably going to lead to machlokes. Don't go home and tell your wife somebody did something not nice. Don't go home. Now, I said this once in the shir. I think it's worth repeating. I wrote an article about it. B'didi aviyuvda. It's such an incident. I was at a wedding, and I was about to sit down next to a very chashuv mensch, an Adam Gadol. And his Rebbetzin was there, and she made a comment. I was meichel her, of course, for this. But she made a comment, don't sit next to my husband, you'll give him a headache. Now what she was afraid of was, she wanted her husband to rest, she was afraid I'd speak to him, I asked him questions. But I was very insulted. And I knew that the man enjoyed my company. Very insulted. And when I came home, it was busting out of me to tell my wife. Do you know what this person said to me? Busting out of me. When you tell your wife, or you tell your best friend, and you vent, it takes away, normally, it takes away the bite. But I remember with tremendous hisgabras, I held back from telling her. By the way, that's a way to gain the oragonas. That's what the Gaon says. That if you want to have the oragonas, for every moment that you could say Lashon Hara and you don't say it, you're zeicha to the oragonas, the hidden light. That's a Gaon. But let me tell you the end of the story. The end of the story is that few months later, they asked this Rebbetzin and my wife to do a project together. And my wife did it gladly. If she would have heard from me what this woman did, she would have never worked with her and never done the mitzvah with her. We have to be very careful. We have to be very careful not to cause anything that could cause machlokes. Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar v'Dasan v'Aviram b'nei Eloya v'Ain ben Peles v'Yakilu al Moshe v'al Aaron. They ganged up on Moshe and on Aaron. So here the Torah is warning us not to be sucked in by people that come for the benefit of the klal. Korach came for the benefit of the klal. Ki kol ha'ela eida kulam kedoshim. Umadua tisnasu al kal Hashem. I mean, we're all having under the Anani HaKavod. We don't need you. Does a bias kula svarm, a bias full, a svarm room need a mezuzah? Does a beged made out of tchelis need the blue thread? Rav Nassan Adler explains that's what they were asking. We don't need you. So they were coming for the sake of the klal. But that was not the real story. The real story is that Korach was jealous of the netzias of Elitzaphan. We know that Moshe and Aaron were the sons of Amram. And Amram got the two top spots, Melech and Kohen Gadol. So he felt that as the son of the next brother, Yitzhar, he should have gotten the next position in Nazi. And instead it went to Elitzaphan. He was angry. But when he came with the Kehillah, that was a smokescreen. Dasan and Aviram, they joined forces. Well, we know Dasan and Aviram were added in for Moshe Rabbeinu when Moshe Rabbeinu told them, Rasha, lo masakeh es reyecha, and called them a Rasha. By the way, you see from this also a big lesson, which I see in the Rabbanis, that people harbor grudges and enmity for decades. You understand, when was it that Moshe Rabbeinu told Dasan and Aviram that they were Russian? It was more than 60 years ago. Moshe Rabbeinu was 20. When he came out of Mitzrayim, he was 80. Happened more than 60 years ago. They harbored this hatred, and Kol Makom Shenemer Nitzim V'Nitzavim. Whenever there was trouble, it was always Dasan and Aviram. That's from 60 years ago. More than 60 years ago. I see this many times. People just don't get over. They harbor resentment. But you see, Dasan and Aviram, they had another agenda. And I have to tell you that this happens many times. Many times. Sometimes there's a situation in a shul where a group comes and say they don't like the rabbi. They don't like the rabbi, he's not doing enough, he's not warm enough, he's not giving the right kind of things, he's too busy with other things. But then you look around and you see the individuals. Each one has a different agenda. This one, the rabbi speaks about Shalom Bayis, and his wife uses it against him. You know, the Rav says, talks so bad about anger. Look, you're such an angry person. So he's resentful to the Rav because the Rav is making him look bad at home. Another one doesn't like it because the Rav is championing Lumdus, and he doesn't know Lumdus. So therefore the Rav is making him look bad. Everyone has a different agenda. Another one doesn't like the rabbi because the rabbi is making him feel bad because he's talking during davening. And each one has an agenda. We're warned. Be careful. Be careful when it comes in Ada, a lot of times it's not what they're saying. That's why I said it leads to sheker too. Sometimes they don't even know. Sometimes they don't even recognize what the real reason why they're getting involved in. They convince themselves that they have righteous regions. Let me tell you what my Rebbe, Rav Moshe, felt about machlokes. Let me tell you about this. There was a city in America whose ruchnius, it was an out-of-town city, whose ruchnius was very weak. Its spirituality was very weak. And the Tuvei Ha'ir, the leaders of the city, rightfully realized and recognized that they had to bring in a personality as a rabbi who would, awaken, be misorer the community, build a yeshiva. So they brought in a Choshev Rav from Europe, from pre-war Lita, and after a short while, he indeed started a yeshiva. He was a wonderful man, but after a while they realized that he wasn't the answer. He was a man who Sandy Koufax didn't mean anything to. He couldn't relate to the American spirit. It just was foreign to him, and he couldn't connect with the sprach, with the language of the youth of America. So at that time, Lakewood was just starting, unrecognizable to today's Lakewood. Lakewood was just starting, and some of the Balabatim decided that it would be a good idea to bring some youth from Lakewood and start another yeshiva. So they approached these Avrechim, these youth, and they asked them about it. And they went and asked Rav Moshe. And Rav Moshe told them that since in the town there are those that are very big Hasidim of the old Rav, they would be upset to bring in competition to the city. It wouldn't be a covet to the old Rav, and it would cause machlokes. And Rav Moshe said, and this is something that you need to remember, this is the first part of the lesson, Rav Moshe said you have to run from machlokes like from fire. Machlokes burns people. You have to run from it like fire. So then they asked, very good question, but if we don't go, the spirituality of the town will continue to deteriorate. It's a good question. So Rav Moshe answered the second big lesson. As bad as the situation is, if there'll be machlokes, it'll be grua yoser. It'll be even worse. You're not going to make the situation better if you introduce machlokes into the town. So they didn't go. 3 years later, this Rav himself came to Rav Moshe and says, it's not working out, what do I do? And Rav Moshe told him, maybe you should bring some young men from Lakewood, and then it happened. Everything in the right time. But we see from here that if we think that the situation will get better from machlokes, that Rav Moshe says doesn't happen. As bad as the situation is, if you introduce machlokes, it's even worse. Now, there has to be, of course, a caveat over here. And that is, but let's say you see something wrong. If you see something wrong, then you go to qualified poskim and you ask them what to do. And you represent both sides fairly. You don't get into an adversarial situation where you fight with people. Fighting with people never turns out good. I have to tell you that there was a situation in the yeshiva where a machlokes broke out between Rosh Yeshiva and the Talmidim. Whatever it is, there could be situations in a yeshiva where the Talmidim feel there's too much pressure, they're being asked to do too much, they're not getting enough food, whatever. Machlokes broke out. And it became very, very unpleasant. And Rav Toirek, he wrote a sefer, Rav Toiker, he wrote a sefer called Bikur Eretz, was asked by Reb Lezer Yehuda Finkel, the Rosh Yeshiva of Mir. Reb Lezer Yehuda Finkel asked him to go and try to make peace in the yeshiva. So Rav Toiker asked Reb Lezer Yehuda Finkel, what could he tell them to shake them up? So he said, say in my name, Finkel said this, Rav Finkel said, say in my name that when I was in Slobodka, a machlokes broke out in Slobodka, and every single person that was involved in the machlokes died a misa mishum, an unusual death. Tell him that in my name. He also writes in his sefer that he knew Rab Mordechai Zuckerman. Rab Mordechai Zuckerman was in the yeshiva in Radin, the Chofetz Chaim's yeshiva. They broke out of machlokes, and he left the yeshiva and he went to Slobodka. And over there in Slobodka, for no apparent reason, the Manal, Rav Avram Gudzinski, Hashem Yinkum Damai, was killed by the Nazis, was Mekarafin. Mamish took him close. So one time he got up the nerves to ask Rav Gudzinski why he was zeicher to this special activity, special behavior, special closeness, So Rav Gudzinski said when he came from Radin to Slobodka, he did a investigation to see what Rav Zuckerman was doing when there was the machlokes. And he found out that he didn't take sides and he stayed out of it. And he was mechabed him because of that. Rav Zuckerman, and this is something to really, we should just stop and think about this. Rav Zuckerman says he remembers when the machlokes broke out in the yeshiva in Radin, and the Chofetz Chaim was already a very old man. Chofetz Chaim came into the Beis Medrash, and they saw that his face was Basar Gadol. It was like had a tremendous inner turmoil. And he said the following statement: the yeshiva in Radin is based on shalom. Machlokes, get out of here. He said it with a passion. And those of you remember that many times I've said, when people have tried to tell me that the mission statement of our shul should be shtika b'tefillah, I told them shtika b'tefillah is important, makam kavua is important, davening with a hat is important, but that's not a mission statement. A mission statement is shalom. Shekol ha-Torah kula nitna la'asa shalom ba'olam. Shenema d'rakah da'achanoim v'chol nesiv v'seh shalom. I was mechavan to this Chofetz Chaim. The yeshiva in Radin is noised on shalom. Told you that's why when the Mishmar HaYotze gave a bracha to the Mishmar HaNichnas, a Beis HaMikdash is a Mikdash, a shul is a Mikdash Ma'at. In the Beis HaMikdash, the bracha that they gave was not that there shouldn't be pigel, not that there shouldn't be tumah, not that there shouldn't be noiser, but rather, Mi sheshikin shmoi b'bayis hazehu yishkem einechem shalom v'shal ava v'achva v'shalom v'reis. That's the mission statement of a Mikdash Ma'at. Tell you something else. There was a tragedy in Eretz Yisrael, a young Talmid Chacham, Shmuel Yoel Greenhouse, passed away. It was a time of great regesh. A young Talmid Chacham dies. It's a huge levaya. The father had the koiches hanefesh, even though he was in grief, to realize that at a time like that, the living have to take it to heart, like the Meiri says, strike when the iron is hot. So he went in to Rabbi Yaleib Steinman, and he asked him what to be ma'ir the olam about. What to be ma'ir the olam? Olam is shaken up. A lot of times a person says, if such a good person could leave the world, who knows? I'm not such a good person. Shakes up a person. So he asked Rabbi Yaleib Steinman what he should talk about. It's interesting. Rabbi Yaleib Steinman said that today's people need to hear two things. They need to hear about hasmada and learning, and to stay away from achlekes. So he told them to speak about hasmada and learning, and to stay away from achlekes. So he told them. Vayikach Korach. Now Korach felt that he had more to offer. He already reached the zenith of being a Levi. The zenith of Levi is, there are many positions. The single highest position is to carry the Aron. Korach was one of those that carried the Aron. He felt that he had a lot more to do. And he wanted more. Wanted more. Reb Zilberstein said Korach's mistake was that you don't take greatness. It has to be given to you. You could offer it. You could suggest. You could make yourself available. But you don't grab greatness. Greatness is decided by Hashem. Decided by Hashem. You know, Rav Moshe never looked to be a Gadol B'Yisrael in America. He wasn't looking to carry the weight of the tzibur, to be a Rashke Bahag, Rosh Kol B'nei HaGoyim. Rav David Feinstein said he came from Luban, and he wanted to teach Torah and write Svarim. But Hashem decided that he should be the Rosh Kol B'nei HaGoyim. How? What happened was all the war widows came. Rav Moshe came in 1937 to America. And in just a few years, the war widows started coming to America. And they didn't know what happened to their husbands. And they wanted to know if they could rebuild their lives. There were hundreds of agunas that no one wanted to touch. You have to understand, an aguna is a way for a person to lose his shem toiv in a second. He goes and permits the woman to remarry, and then 5 years later the husband comes back. First of all the new children are mamzerim. Second of all, she's forbidden to the old husband and the new husband. It's a tremendous, it's a disaster. A disaster. No one wanted to touch it. Please watch The Warrior, please. No one wanted to touch it. So what did Rav Moshe do? He said, look, nobody wants to touch it. It's a rachmanis on these women. So he got involved. Never once did a husband come back. It was not the hundreds of agunas. But that Hashem chose him. Korach wanted to take it. It's a mistake. Can't take it. Hashem has to give it. That was the same mistake of the Chashmonaim. After the Chashmonaim saved Klal Yisrael, I mean, here's a handful of people saved Klal Yisrael. They were heroes, true heroes. They risked their lives. Many of them died. Many of them lost their life to save Klal Yisrael, physically and spiritually. A time of Lashkichim Terisachal Avir Mechul Keretzenach. But then they felt they took Klal Yisrael. They were the ones that risked their lives. They took the leadership. Now they're entitled to the monarchy. Man, they weren't supposed to take the monarchy. Lo Yasser Shevet Mi Yehuda. It's supposed to go to Yehuda, not to Kohanim. There's a division of power. So it's like Lahavdil, there's a division of power. We learned the three different executive branch, right? There's different powers. There's different powers. And because they took it, they all died. Until a girl said, Kol ha'omer mebeish Chashmonai ana abdahu. She fell off the roof. She was the last of the Chashmonaim. They were wiped out. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi banished Chanukah from the Mishnah. There's no Masechtas Chanukah. It's not even mentioned except Agav in Bava Kama, if you have a menorah in front of a store, and in Bameh Malikin, when it talks about what you're allowed to light with, it's mentioned only incidentally. That's because of this mistake. You don't take covet. Vayikach Rashi, Vayikach Korach. So Rashi asks the famous question. Korach was such a pekeach. Moral is to fight with Moshe, who took us out of Mitzrayim and split the Yam. Who went up to Har Sinai. What is he crazy? Einoi hitasai. He was tricked by his vision. He had a vision that tricked him. Einoi hitasai. He saw Nevuah that from him would come Shmuel. If him would come Shmuel, he must be right. He must be right. He must be the winner over here, because otherwise Shmuel, Moshe v'Aaron v'Kayin of Shmuel b'Kari Shmuel. Shmuel was shakal like Moshe and Aaron. He's the Zayda. So he's safe. Little did he know that Shmuel would come because his children backed out. He didn't know. He was misled. So the Steipler Gaon in his Sefer Birchas Peretz says, Ki yesharim darchei Hashem, upright is the ways of Hashem, tzadikim yelchu bam, the righteous walk with them, but on the other hand, uposhim yikashlu bam, the same message could cause the righteous to succeed and the wicked, the sinners, to stumble. Korach could have took it a different way. Shmuel is coming from me. I better behave. He took it the wrong way. And says the Birchas Peretz, what made him look at it the wrong way? It's a scary thing. Two people could see the same thing. They could get messed up. They should get messed up. A wife could see that her husband has a need and either become a remarkable Ezer Kenegdoi or say, I got to watch out, I don't want to be taken advantage of. You need to have good midas. There's a medrash in the beginning of a Yikar Rabbah that's so frightening. And it says, if we all know, Vayikra Hashem al Moshe, Hashem summoned Moshe, Vayidaber Elav. The Medrash says that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't dare go in until he was summoned. And then the Medrash says, Kol mi she'ein boi derech eretz. This is frightening. Kol mi she'ein boi derech eretz nevela toive himenu. a carcass is better than him. See a carcass in the butcher shop? Somebody that doesn't have derech eretz, nevela toiva himenu. A carcass is better than him. Now, when we talk about working on our midas, we're talking about working on our not being self-centered, talking about working on anger, talk about working on greed, laziness, jealousy. Rabbeinu Yoina in Pirkei Avos makes a statement which the whole chinuch system has to be based on this statement. You ask people, how do you make a Talmid Chacham? So people will say, well, first they have to learn up enough, and then you introduce them to the Yeshiva Shederech, and you introduce them how to make a laning and learn a Rashi and understand to be Medayik in a Rashi and figure out a Taisvis and what's the difference of opinion of the different answers of Taisvis and the difference between Rashi and Taisvis, and then how to Asukei Shmaitz Aliba the Hilchas, how to derive from the Gemara and the Rishonim what the Psak is, and how to learn up a Shulchan Aruch and the Gra. Rabbi Weiss is talking how to learn. Says Rabbeinu Yoina, La'olam lo'tishkain atayra b'mi sheyesh lo midas rois. Never will the Torah reside by somebody that doesn't have good midas. Never. La'olam. A man could go to shiurim, he comes home and yells at his wife and treats her miserably. A boy comes home and is disrespectful and has to pun him to his parents. That boy, he can learn a Birchas Shmuel. He can learn a Reb Chaim and the Rambam, but he's not going to have, Torah is not going to reside in him. And by the way, that rule is the meaning of Sur Meirav Asei Toiv. Toiv is ein toiv el Torah. Shenem kilekach toiv nasati lochem. But you want to have a career in toiv? Sur meirav asei toiv. You have to turn away from the ra first. Derech eretz kodma la Torah. Derech eretz has to be before Torah. Nase and then v'nishma. That's what Rabbeinu Yoina says. Nishma is learning. It's when you listen to Hashem, but first there has to be a nase. Otherwise, it's like pouring wine in a very dirty, soapy, filthy cup. Wine's not going to taste good. But b'korach shepikeach haya, ma'arol l'shtus zeh. Korach was misled by knowing that Shmuel would come from him. You know that this test was given also to Yosef HaTzadik. Same kind of a test. When he was tempted by the wife of Potiphar, he saw a vision that his wife is going to come from this house. And he felt such a magnetic pull to the wife of Potiphar. And then he saw this vision. You know how this could have messed him up? You know what the vision was all about? Because in that house was adopted Asnas. And he would be married to Asnas. But he saw that vision. We have to be very careful. We have to know we don't get visions. But the Yetzer Hara, when it comes to machlokes, also has ways to tempt us. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Oh boy, does the Yetzer Hara have ways to tempt us. And one of its ways is by saying that it's a mitzvah. We got to get rid of the talkers from the shul. That's our mitzvah. And then people fight about it. But they're fueled by a mitzvah. That's what happened to Shmuel, to Korach. He was fueled. I'm going to have Shmuel. To be very careful. That's why Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz, in his Yaris Davash, says something very vital. Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz says that the Mishnah says, what's a machloikis l'shem shemayim? Machloikis beishamay beisil. That's it. You have a theoretical machloikis, that's a machloikis l'shem shemayim. Carrying the banner of this is the right thing to do, it's never a machloikis l'shem shemayim. Machloikis is never the way to go about it. Everybody has to sit down together and figure out an eitzah and ask an adam gadol. Machloikis is never the way. Now, the Barchinavshi asks an interesting question. It asks about Korach Mara L'Shtuzeh. He was a smart man. Why did he get involved in it? Of course, it doesn't ask that about Dasan and Aviram, because we know they were angry at Moshe Rabbeinu. He called them a Rasha. We know the reason. Aim Ben Pelas, we know that his wife told him, you don't have it. What are you? If Moshe is the leader, you're not the leader. If Korach is the leader, what do you have from this? But I asked the Barchinavshi, what about the Messiah and the Chamish Mish? Why don't we ask, why did they get involved? They were also Chachamim. You know how big Chacham the Chidah and the Nachal Kedumim said, what's the cheshbon of 250? He said that Korach wanted to set up from all 11 tribes, not Levi, because Levi was against Levi, but from all 11 tribes, he set up in each one a small circuit court of 23. You could pass Indian Nefashos with a small circuit court of 23. 11 times 23 is 253. So there were 250 people plus Dasan, Aviram, and Ayin. These were all people that were right to be on Sanhedrin, on the Sanhedrin Ketana. What caused them to get involved? So Barchinavshi says, no, on them there's no. Korach was very rich. He gave them money. He gave them meals. He made meetings. Once that happens, there's no question anymore. If money is involved, there's no question. People are meshuchad with money. Money is involved, there's no question. And he develops a halacha from this. If there's a machloikis, don't take money from either of the sides. Because if you take money from either of the sides, you'll never be able to see the other side. That's the power of money. That's what money does. Money can be very dangerous, rabbis. Very dangerous. So we know that the wife of Ayin Ben Pelas saved him. We all know the story. The contrast between Korach's wife and the wife of Ayin Ben Pelas. Wife of Korach. No, I won't finish now. Next one, yeah. The wife of Korach. The wife of Korach said, he makes a fool of you. He has the Levium shaved all their body hair and then picks them up and waves them. He's making a fool of you. So Korach said, but he does that to himself too. He's also a Levi. Thomas Nafshi and Plishtim just to get at you. He's even Mavaza himself. And she rates him on. She stoked the fires. That Iveles biyada tersena. She tears her home down. Mamish tears her home there. On the other hand, the wife of Ein Ben Pelas saved him. Mamish saved him. The wife of Ein Ben Pelas, it says she told him, what are you going to gain from this? So he says, I gave my word. She said, let me take care of it. She gave him wine, she got him drunk, she put him to sleep. Then she went out in front of the house and took off her sheitel. And when they came, they wouldn't come near a woman without a sheitel. These were righteous people. It's a big lesson. They were balei machlokes, but they were righteous. People could become compartmentalized. In a lot of areas they're good, but they're balei machlokes. It's a big lesson. Somebody says, no, he can't be a bal machlokes. He's from a yid. He could be very from a yid. But people succumb to machlokes. The righteous woman, chachmas noshim bonsa boisa. A person has to realize that he has. People don't realize it. When you talk about what your wife does for you, there are things that are not readily apparent. It says, "Ein bracha mitzuya b'seich beisay shel adam ela b'shvil ishtay." But a lot of times a man doesn't recognize that. She's not working. He doesn't realize that in her schus he's succeeding. I saw an interesting shaila posed. It was a Maggid Shir, I can relate to this, a Maggid Shir that had a shir with a lot of people coming to it every night, and he never took off, because if he took off, people would say, if he could take off, I can take off. He set an example. And his wife's brother was making a bar mitzvah. So in the morning she tells him, and he said, I'll work on getting you a ride. So she looked crestfallen, and then he heard her mutter under her breath, I'm beginning to feel like an almana, a lebedik almana. And then she turned to him and says, it's not enough. I take care of everything every night. I watch the kids. I put them to bed. But I ask you just to come with me to a family simcha, and you tell me no. So the man heard what she said under her breath, that she's feeling like a lebedik almana, and he took it very much to heart, and he went to ask a big paisik what to do. So the paisik told him that the great paisik, one of the most prolific writers, Shlomo Kluger was a prolific writer. Reb Chaim Pelagi wrote 200 svarim plus. Reb Chaim Pelagi made it a point that he always went to simchas with his wife. And he said that that's included in Oava Kigufay or Mechabda Yosem Megufay. To honor her more than yourself. Especially if she makes such a comment, I'd like to add that it becomes a mitzvah she'ena yochel asas al yedei acherim. She can't take another man with her. It becomes a mitzvah she'ena yochel asas al yedei acherim. We have to close the Gemara to do such a mitzvah. In general, a person has to know that they have to have, don't you see I'm busy, making a parnas, they have to know that hatzlachah. There are people that work very hard and they don't make money. People I know, big businesses, at the end of the year, they're in the red. They work very hard. They don't make any money. Then there are people that make money. A lot of times it has to do with a wife. A person has to have a kurs hatoiv and show a kurs hatoiv to a wife. Like a wife like Ein Ben Pelas. Great champion. Agav, they also bring down that there was a shaila of a man who was asked to go on a mission for Yad La'achem to raise money. He was a good speaker. And there was a setup arranged for Yad La'achem where he was to speak by a breakfast to make money. At the same time, he was offered to be sandik by the bris of an einikel. He didn't know what to do. So sandik by the bris of his einikel, or to keep his commitment for Yad La'achem, one of the major tzedakahs in Eretz Yisrael. So the Pesach told him that the Ben Ish Chai had Talmidim that went to India and opened up a Jewish community in India. And one of his Talmidim, who was a very wealthy man, wrote a shaila that he wants to donate a huge amount of money to start an institution. And he has a dilemma whether he should open up a yeshiva or a hospital. They both save lives. No hospital in the area. He's in a dilemma what to do. So the Ben Ish Chai told him that you have to look at what will not happen if you don't do it. He said there will always be people, even goyim, that will build a hospital. But very few people will make a yeshiva. So the Pesach told him there's always somebody that will take Sandakais. But Yad La'achem needs you to speak. Of course, if his wife wanted him to be there, then he should be there for the other reason. We're not talking about that. I'm sorry we're finishing so late. We started late. I'm very sorry. I want to conclude with one more thought. To tell you, of course, the share continues throughout the summer. Also, I got already advance notice that my annual Q&A by the Irgun Shirei Torah for Rabbi Bald will take place on Monday, August 19th. So you have a little time for that. But Monday, August 19th, with Yossi Tov asking the questions, will take place in the Irgun. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, the Binkowitz family, and also Dr. and Mrs. Nass. The support of this share is through your sponsorships. It's $3.60 to sponsor a share. It's heard on TorahAnytime.com, on Facebook, on Kol HaLashon, on Torah Communications Network, and of course to my subscribers. To sponsor, which really helps the share, if you benefit from it, call or text 718-916-3100, or email rmmwsi, Rabbi Moshe Me'away, Staten Island, at AOL.com. We know that when it says Vayika Korach ben Yitzhak ben Kahas ben Levi, it doesn't say ben Yaakov. Divrei Hayom, it says ben Yisrael in Chronicles, but it doesn't say it over here. Yaakov Avinu was mispalel b'chvoidam al teicha b'kaholam al teichad kevoidi. I don't want to be attached to them. I don't want my name attached. A name is a very important thing. Everybody knows that I'm fascinated with names. Always see the Shema Gorim in a name. From Noach, who was called that because of his Matzachain. From Moshe, that's Hashem, because Oira Panim El Panim K'Moshe. And Moshe's Meseh, he was chosen from a sheep. Basio or Bisya is the same letters as Teva, because she took out the box. And Ephraim is without the Vav, B'Gematria 400, because he took the 400 from the Moshe Machpelah. Ephraim is Piron, payment. And Ephraim is Afaron. His whole yichus was that he charged for some earth. 400 me'as shekel, kesef over la seicher. Everything is in names. I saw a fascinating name story that has many lessons. Many lessons. Many lessons. Many lessons! This couple, they became Balei Tshuva. As it happens many times, one was ahead of the other. In this case, the husband was ahead of his wife. He became a Talmid Chacham. They had their first boy, And she didn't want a yeshivish name. She wanted a more modern name. So she wanted to name the child Noam. Noam. And it really troubled him and wanted to give a Torah-dik name, like Avram, like Shmuel. But he didn't want to make a machlokes. So he tabled it. The day before the bris, he said, and she still was steadfast. No, Noam. So what did he do? He davened to Hashem for an eitzah. And he said, Hashem, please help it that I could satisfy my wife, but I could give my bechar a real Torah-dik name. So first he had a thought, yet that day before, would it be all right for me to attach a second name, a Torah-dik name? So she said, let me think about it. She went out to shop for the bris, and there were placards in Eretz Yisrael and signs inviting everybody to the Hilula, to the Yortzeit tomorrow of Rebbe Elimelech Milozhensk. And she saw the name in print, and it sounded good, Elimelech. So she came home that night and said, you know what, how about Elimelech? So he said, yeah, that's a good name, Elimelech. That's a good name. So the next day, now he didn't know that Rebbe Elimelech Milozhensk wrote a famous sefer, the Noam Elimelech. He didn't know that. But okay. So the next day, a little bit ashamed, he said, V'yikari Shmoi Yisrael, Noam Elimelech. And everybody was oohing and ahhing, what a perfect name for the Yortzei, what a perfect name. And he's looking around, well, people are happy with the name Noam, and they go, what are you talking about? The name Noam Elimelech, the Kedushas Noam Elimelech. And then this couple started learning the Noam Elimelech. So it's a happy ending. But there's a big lesson in this. And that is daven for an eitzah. Sometimes we don't know what the eitzah is. It says that when you daven, it says, Kasha zivugin shaladim kekriyas yamsef. Kasha parnos sasai shaladim kekriyas yamsef. What does that mean? Nobody would have dawned that the Yidden would be saved by walking through the Yam, and then it would close up on the Egyptians. Nobody would figure that out. Sometimes you have no idea how the parnas is going to come. Sometimes there's a problem. One spouse wants something, and the other spouse wants something. Spouse wants to go to the country, and the other one is more economically responsible and says, "There's no way. We have to pay for the home and the bungalow. There's no way." And then the last minute, they pray for an eitzah. The last minute, he's offered a great job in the country, which allows him, comes with a bungalow, and allows him to pay for both, and everybody's happy. Daven to Hashem. So you learn from this story. You also learn that there's a special schus given to parents to figure out the right name. You don't interfere. Parents shouldn't interfere with the children. And don't interfere. Children have it's a special schus. You see, they were given the idea. They stumbled on it by mistake. But together they came up with the perfect name. It's a schus that Hashem gives. And thirdly, it's not kedai to fight about such things. Shalom has to come first. I want to thank you all for coming.